I am starting to really enjoy making videos. Here is the things I think contributed to this result. First of all, one of the big problems was usually that I hadn't quite figured out a format that would work. So I switched in between talking head format, usually with a microphone. But usually what I would have to do is I would have to set up the microphone. And what usually happened is that about 1/2 of all the things I recorded were just trash. Why were they trash? Because the sound was not connected properly. Because I connected it via USB interface to my Galaxy S10 and sometimes it just didn't connect via USB-C. So what I figured out is I eventually figured out that I would have to use the analog one. And this now seems to work. Additionally, I have now my microphone fixed in place, which means that I also have to speak as loud as I normally would, and I cannot exaggerate my voice by making it a little bit more crispy and more radio-like by moving closer to the mic and using the proximity effect and so on and so forth. But I actually have more to use and rely on my normal speaking voice, you could say. Even though I sometimes do this still, and I think it also makes sense because if I listen to this myself and I just listen to my voice in the different modalities, then just by switching to a different voice and just stating the same thing, I think, oh yeah, that makes more sense. If it's spoken by a voice that is not as high-pitched, but much more modular, you could say. That's one of the first things. Basically, optimizing my setup. That would allow me then to just record whenever I had an idea and to not have setup times, to minimize my setup times. The second thing is that I struggled in the last years a lot with higher body fat. You could also say with higher weight, but higher weight is actually not a good proxy because, let's face it, your bones won't probably change very much in weight. Your muscles might change in weight, but most people aren't able to put like 20 kilograms in 2 weeks, so therefore the only thing that's left, apart from your organs and so on and so forth, which probably also don't change a lot in weight, is fat. So basically, the only thing you can change short term is fat. So now, the more fat you have, the worse you look. There seems to be this correlation. I don't want to generalize this correlation, but at least in terms for me, or just in my experience, I tend to look better and also better on camera, and therefore also think that I talk, but if I just take a look at me and I talk about nutrition and I'm about 20 to 25% in body fat, maybe I was 20% at the max, then it just screams incongruency. It just screams you don't know what you're talking about. And if it screams you don't know what you're talking about, then the voice in my head that actually is probably a pretty good proxy for how this video might be received just screams deleted. Now, if I'm still high in body fat and it doesn't change, then I basically, every single video I record is either 1/2 of it is without proper sound, and not the other half of it, but every video I record is something I don't want to put out. I don't want anyone to see because I didn't used to be that high in body fat. And now if somebody sees me this way, I'm thinking what they are thinking. Like, oh yeah, what happened to him and so on and so forth. And the third part now finally is something that improved more of a function of these two. Because as soon as I am able to just record whenever I want to, as soon as I am able to also figure out a few other things in my life that then lead to me actually being able to speak in a way that actually makes sense and therefore in total produces a higher quality video that actually has a red thread going through the video, that actually is not just me rambling about something without me knowing what I'm actually talking about, then I think the third thing is something that eventually will come in place. And this is me improving my ability to speak. But that's not the whole thing. So me improving my ability to speak was something I bet on over all of this time. Because the one thing that I can very drastically improve is my ability to speak, my ability to present things to a camera. And if I improve only this one ability and I set all other things constrained, basically, fixed, if I don't edit my video, if I don't edit out the amps, then the only thing I can do is either stop the video, which I now allow myself to do, but is also not very beneficial in terms of optimizing for output and also for quality output over time, because if I cannot say am, eventually I will stop saying am if I want to put out a video. If I, for example, implied that with every am I say, I just have to stop the video and restart, then I will hit a threshold eventually where I either stop saying am or I just don't record any videos at all. So I am basically forcing myself into improvement. And that's the same approach I took with recording these videos and not editing them. I forced myself into improving the videos just by improving myself, mostly my social, not my social skills, but my communication skills. And now, a final thing that happened actually was I had an idea for a format. So basically previously, there were two different things I did. I either recorded my screen, and since I try to record all of my videos in portrait, which now means in terms of recording something on a screen, it makes sense on a phone, but it doesn't make so much sense on a notebook. You would actually have to turn the notebook in order to then have the proper screen orientation, and either basically turn the external screen or the normal screen. And then you would have to deconnect the external screen, but then of course if you deconnect the external screen, then you also might not be able to connect your hard drives and so on and so forth, and also the microphone might then not be able to be connected because you have to rotate it, therefore it's slightly different. So here is what I came up with. I combined both formats. The talking head format, where I just usually am here talking and my head is in the picture. That's why it's called the talking head format. At least for me, I call it the talking head format. And I combine it kind of with the other one. And the other one being me drawing usually something on a digital board, you could say. That's the one scenario. And the other one is also where I do app reviews and stuff like this. The app reviews I still cannot do really here. What I still can do is I can take my phone and point to something like this, which now also kind of works better because I have a given format. And so what I can do very easily is that I can take a pen, for example, and since I now am stable on this desk here, I can hold my phone fairly stable and also use a pen to then point to the specific things. And of course, I can also then see myself in the screen, which would not be possible with an external camera, because then you wouldn't have as big of a screen as my phone is. So therefore, using my phone again has the potential benefit that I can basically show this, even though I'm not seeing it, obviously. The same is true for this. I obviously often look down here, but I could also just look here and just draw something. And over time, I would actually improve the skill of mirror drawing. So now, I took these two formats and tried to combine them. So what I thought of is, what if I, instead of trying to make basically a tablet format possible by just using a tablet. So this is the Microsoft Surface 2 and Surface Book 2. And it works for this purpose really well. And you can use a digital pen and then draw on here. But what I found is that I usually just want to have my notebook up here. And I can research things on my notebook. Otherwise, the only device that is left is my second phone. And I don't want to type on my phone to just look up a word because it's way faster if I use a keyboard. So therefore, if I want this to be plugged in, but simultaneously I need it in order to have something to display here digitally, the problem then is that I would need an additional device, such as a tablet, which also costs something, opportunity cost of not investing, and so on and so forth. So this route also has the other side effect that on a device like this, if you are in OneNote, for example, and then you tap something, and then the whole program goes off sideways, or you just lose access to this, and so on and so forth, and it's just not as fast. This here, the only thing I have to do is use this and a white paper board, pen. And now I can draw. I can draw, and it's super quick, it's easy, and it also has kind of this haptical feeling. I think makes sense. And I also don't have to worry about exposing the screen, ideally, because this is already in the real world. It cannot produce more or less brightness. If you see something on here, then it's the real world, so I don't have to adapt the device I'm showing this in the real world. And what this allows me to do now is to speak. And whenever I want to visualize something, I just draw something on here. And whenever I don't, I just speak. And that's basically the standard layer is the talking head format. But I can additionally add a visual layer without any editing and so on. Without any editing, without any additional post-production time, I can add visuals to a video. And if I then have a format that is even more close to this, and I use this then like here, or like here, it depends on where I position this, and also where I position myself, obviously, then I could also draw just a chart like this. And you can see me, you can see my hands. It is kind of engaging, I think, at least compared to me just talking on a screen. Because the problem is, on a screen, what you sometimes see is that you just see the screen. And then you have my voice. And then you have me talking 30 seconds about something where I don't have visuals for. What you can do is, for example, draw. So if you wanted to explain the sentence I just said, and then you want to draw something, but you don't have visuals for it, you could, of course, try to draw a pencil, and then you try to draw something, and you don't have visuals for it. So this is now a pencil, but you don't have visuals for it. So what do you use for the visuals? I don't know. Of course, you could then rely on bigger graphs, on bigger concepts, like, I don't know. And then you could either draw something or create visuals for it, which would be something I would do right now in this format, I guess. But in this format, I also have me being visible at all times. And I don't need to now have something that is manually influenceable, like me being, for example, in a circle up here, and the rest of the video being the screen recording, for example. Because what this adds is a layer of me being able to adjust this in the future. And if I can adjust this in the future, I try to optimize it in the future. Maybe for retention, maybe for different platforms. And this is a problem, because this creates work, and this also creates work whenever you change the thing. But here, the format is me recording in real life. I cannot change much of anything about this. If I record on OneNote and I record on a dark screen, for example, on a black screen with a red pen, but I then don't like the red pen anymore, then I could just delete all the videos with the red pen and then have a new standardized format. The thing is, the more you can influence, the more options you have, the more responsibility you also have to optimize these options. But if you take away the options by stating, for example, I only record on video with me talking head, and usually like this. I also can now take the Surface Book and load up images. For example, yesterday I had the idea. So I was quite unproductive and just watched the Neuralink presentation. And then I just took a few screenshots. So as I took these screenshots, they then synchronized, not really synchronized, but they at least were displayed on my notebook. And I just had the idea, what if I just have this workflow where I just screenshot things on the internet that are interesting, then I can just take my notebook and potentially not hurting copyright as much as I would with video and also audio, because images, even though often copyright infringement, is, I think, at least in social media, kind of a standard thing you have to use, kind of. Of course, you can take the higher ground and link everything you have in there, but at least as of currently, I think it makes sense to not try to do this as much, because otherwise I just cannot produce any videos if I have to link like 25 files. 25 files a video. I don't want to talk myself out of the actual responsibility to do this, but I think in terms of competition, if everybody else does it and I don't, and I link 30 images in a given picture, then I think I'm at least somewhat on the better side if I don't take external video, because on YouTube ID, on the YouTube ID system, everybody who owns video on YouTube has basically their video already in the ID system. And also movie companies, for example, have, so they can claim it. But an image is not as easily claimable because there is no big database already. Maybe this will change in the future, and this is just my current strategy, which is kind of a little bit of a cheat, you could say. But compared to somebody who makes a video essay about something and uses actual footage from films, not in order to discuss the film, but just as stock footage, because it is more engaging and a lot more people like seeing Leonardo DiCaprio when talking about finances, then compared to this format, I think I'm a little bit on the safer side. So what I did yesterday was to just take the notebook and just say, okay, this is the image from the presentation. And then next slide. just similar to this. So since a notebook and a DIN A4 paper is almost the same format, and if I just move it closer to the camera, it also almost fills half of the screen, I now don't have to combine these two video files anymore, and I save myself all the editing time. So basically, I have the ideation time where I come up with the ideas, I have the actual recording time, or writing time, but I more and more make videos, and then the distribution time where I decide on which channels and on which platforms to post all of these things. What also allowed me to maybe record a little bit more, and also a little bit just to have a little bit more of a clear structure, because the main problem is that you have ideas, but you don't know how to turn these ideas into reality. And even if you try to, you just are not able to produce anything that is at least on some level of quality that you actually want to put out into the world, and publicly everybody and all your friends can potentially watch this if they discover it. So what also allowed me to kind of do this is another approach, which was, previously I said, okay, for every single channel I want to have a web page, and then this web page is the main hub of the internet, and then I have all the different social accounts on the social media pages. So the web page would host the blog, and I would try to blog, and I would try to publish one single blog post, so basically a longer written format, similar to a newspaper article, for example, once a month. The problem was just this backend kept me from making the actual content. Writing is 5 to 10 times more time consuming, I guess, than video, for example. If you are somewhat decent at speaking, then I think it doesn't make sense that much anymore to use writing. Of course, there are many formats that still need writing. Papers need writing. Academic papers need writing. And also writing is a lot more concise in terms of format. But if I just can produce a lot more and therefore turn this into an actual profitable business that actually then allows me to sustain me, myself, potentially my future family, then I maybe just have the responsibility to switch to something that is writing. That is not writing. So therefore, I made 2 adjustments to this strategy. First of all, since the backend was so intensive, not only intensive in terms of time, but it also cost me anywhere from 10 to 20 bucks an hour just to, not an hour, but a month to just maintain all the different domains. What if I just didn't have a web page? Then I could create channels. Of course, I would have to kind of have something similar. And here's what I came up with. I just use link trees, very simple web pages where you can register for free, and then link all these social media pages as web pages. These are now the pages. And the other thing is not my page anymore. It's just my blog. It's not the hub of me, of this channel, of this side of me on the internet. But the actual hub is the link tree. And this link tree is the only thing you need here. For now, if I want to create a new brand or a new channel, I usually call it channel, even though then also the individual social accounts also sometimes are called channel. On Instagram, for example, you usually call something channel. On Facebook, you call it a page. On YouTube, you call it a channel. On TikTok, you also call it usually a channel or an account. So now, here's the concept I also came up with. If I have a new idea, if I have a new format, then what I said is, I want to make it as easy as possible to create this new format. For example, recently I had the idea, so I still study, what if I turned studying, kind of increase the social pressure by also making a channel out of this. And I share the things I study actually, more or less in real time, with a slight delay obviously. Then I could also monetize kind of my studying. So for the rest of my life, I could potentially turn this into content. Therefore, potentially gain at least AdSense with it, or however I want to monetize or need to monetize this in the future. So studying was one thing I wanted to, but I couldn't, because then I would have needed to create a web page, and this takes a lot of time. And then every time I also began spitting. Not that nice. Every time now, I want to make one change to a single web page. Because I standardize all of these web pages, so now in the blogs, I need to make this one change now to currently 10 to 15 pages, which takes an hour if I want to have a single change, which also is good, I think, to some extent, because it means that I have to discuss all of this previously. And these decisions I make then and turn into and actually implement them, these have to be solid, and these have to last for at least a week, a month. Because if I'm make design decisions, for example, and I don't have all of these standardized, and I just don't know what. Example, dark mode on one of these pages, for example. I decided to do a dark mode switch. So everybody could choose whether they saw the page, the blog, in light mode or in dark mode. And I had this previously, and then I realized most people already set their preference on their OS device, on the OS of their device. So therefore, there was also an option in my plugin I had installed, but of course you also need to sort through all the different dark mode plugins, if they actually work, how good they work, in which scenarios they work, do they make the page faster or slower, and so on and so forth. So, what I recently made, as of a change, instead of having a dark mode symbol, I just got rid of it. It's simpler. It has less clutter on the web page, and therefore now it just adapts to the OS of the device, which sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work, but maybe in the future it will work on all of these pages. And I just set the default to a dark mode page, but if somebody has enabled light mode, it switches to light mode. So therefore, it's just an additional step that allows me to have better user interface for a given user, because it's simpler, it's easier. But it's a big change, and it takes a lot of internal discussion with myself. Should I do this? Should I not do this? What are the potential upsides? Is it worth thinking about even this? What I'm trying to say is, similar to constraining these decisions before, the less of these options I have, the less I need to optimize them. If I wouldn't have the option to have a dark mode or not have a dark mode, but if instead Linktree decided if it should be in dark mode or not in dark mode, or if Linktree just had a few different design options and I could choose them and I just standardize them over all of the Linktrees, which I have, then I have somebody else figuring out all of the backend here. And I could completely get rid of all the backend. Additionally, what I am still thinking about is getting rid of the blog entirely. This would save me $10 a month. Of course, it's not that much, but reducing any cost is a good cost. Additionally, what I recently thought is I could maybe get rid of the Adobe subscription, which costs me about 150 euros a year. And thereby, I would be profitable with less money, with less revenue from the overall business, because I just have less costs. Also, because I record these videos lean, that's what I call it, similar to the Lean Startup coined, so the term is coined by Eric Ries, who wrote the Lean Startup, a kind of a guide to start up a startup. And Lean Video allows me to not need a computer which has super high graphics, a super good graphics card, because I also need to have a computer that is in this format, because I actually want to write on it for studying, but also for this format. I years ago already bought a computer which would have the drawing function, because I know I wanted to create videos. For years I didn't really properly use it, but I used it in the beginning mostly for studying. So if I had a script, I would write on the script, and then it allowed me to transition into a completely digital lifestyle, basically. I try to not write anything, and this is also not really writing, because I delete it. So it's not permanent, and I'm also not using any paper. Of course, I'm wasting a little bit of white paper pen, but I think it's kind of excusable compared to me actually writing this on a blog, on a notepad. In the last few weeks, I had the idea of the studying brand, and I didn't launch it. I had this idea of the studying brand for almost 2 years at this point in time, and I didn't launch it, because the launch itself takes days. To set up the website, to then standardize the website, to then copy all of the settings, hundreds of settings from the other websites to this website, to set up Google Sitekit, to set up proper tracking, which I still haven't. I still don't have a proper tracking across all of my social channels. I still don't know how many total views on TikTok I have if I don't manually input them into my Excel spreadsheet. These are things I miss out on. These are optimizations I miss out on if I manage the backend of my web pages. So what I thought also is, if I still want to write posts, what if I just use platforms that already manage the backend for me, such as Substack, such as Medium, or I just write blog posts on Facebook and Instagram. But it doesn't make a lot of sense, because you cannot insert images you can basically not format the images on Facebook and Instagram. What you only can do is write text and have a couple of images. So therefore, I'm thinking about maybe switching all of the blogs over to Medium and Substack, and then I could still write, but it would be a lot easier. And I also would need to publish in time, because another thing you can do is this here. If you write something and you want to have it released at a certain point in time, it doesn't matter when you actually wrote it. You can also release it historically, which is possible on a website, which led to me scheduling and not. But it also leads to you not being as accountable. Because if the only way you can publish every month is to actually publish every month in real time, and you cannot finish the article 2 days after and then just schedule it before, this also decreases traffic probably, because the first time something is posted, it already has an old date, which is weird, and therefore all the platforms, all the big social platforms don't have the system. But you can do it on your blog, you can do it on your podcast. But it allows to decrease your accountability to yourself, because you then can just write whenever you want to, and you don't have to hit a finished date, a published date. But time constraints, such as a publishing date, are actually one of the most beneficial methods of increasing productivity. I discovered, at least for myself. So what I recently did is I had ideas for just stupid stuff. And the stupid stuff is me, for example, making jokes about something. Maybe on a... What if I have a joke, for example, about longevity? I cannot just post it to my health channel. Why? Because it would be a breaking of format. Because usually I am here and I'm sometimes joking, but not the whole format is joking. So therefore, what if I just want to create a channel and I have like 35 ideas as of now for making these skits? Then I could create a channel. But if I then have to create a backend and a web page and come up with the perfect name, because as soon as you register a domain, you have to rent it for a month, a year, and it costs you. But if you don't have a domain, you can just change the username on all of the sites. You cannot change the email you usually use, but here is kind of the setup I use. I have an idea for a new format. Not really a new format, but something I want to do. So what I have come up with are these 2 following steps. The first one is to create an email address. And this email address over time doesn't need to be identical to the brand name. So in the past I thought it needs to be the brand name, and if the brand name is not available on my email provider, then I just take something like official. So brandnameofficial.com at blah blah blah.com. So now the problem on YouTube, for example, is that as soon as you use a Gmail or another mail to register a YouTube channel, the email is kind of connected to this account. Because it's a YouTube channel and it's also owned by YouTube. So it's not independent of each other. So therefore, if you change the brand name, and let's say you create a brand and then you want to use the brand name because it's so good for a different brand. Happened to me with one where I share things about managing my life, basically. And the name was so good, and I thought I have to take this name and make something else of it and not use it for the brand I initially intended it for. But if you now already have a YouTube channel and you already have videos and views, what you now can do, what I discovered, which is the end of this discussion, is that you can transfer now a YouTube channel to a different account, but you lose a few data points, such as demographics and so on. So basically the email now is kind of independent. So you can use this email, this brand email, to manage this brand, to manage brand requests and so on and so forth. And then you just use this email to sign up for all of the different accounts on all of the social platforms, and ideally you save yourself the same handle. Let's say you want to make lifestyle vlogs, then you just call it the lifestyle vlog. And then you might be able to register this brand name, probably not on all of these platforms. Of course, there's also a big discussion about what the name actually should be. But because now, in my now system, historically, if I registered now a domain, the brand name was fixed. Because the whole page was on here, and I had the brand name at least for a year, usually. And so if I wanted to change the brand name and switch it to a different, I also had the whole backend. The WordPress site is a file, basically, a big file. And this file is displayed whenever you visit this file destination. And then you can navigate in this interactive file, and then you can just read the blog post, for example, a blog post. But if the domain name is fixed and the brand name is fixed, and then you cannot easily change the brand name. So now what I came up with is I just have the email fixed. I can also change the email, but of course every email that went from one of these accounts to your email account is then kind of on the old email account, and therefore it doesn't really work out that well. So I figure it makes sense to just use an email account. You could also make an argument for just registering random emails in order for you to then not have a brand name affiliation. So you could just register 03658. But the problem is whenever you then log into one of these sites, then you obviously have to remember which of these is actually the correct brand if you have multiple ones. So I then set up all of these accounts on all of these platforms, and now if I don't have a domain, I can just set up an additional account on Medium, for example, or on Substack. Therefore, also using the monetization features of Substack, for example, which allows you to have a subscription. Basically, it allows you to make a newspaper. And the people who want to read this newspaper just subscribe to it. You don't have to manage people wanting a refund, for example, which you would have if you make this again on your own. Using these systems set up by other people, of course, also comes with the risk of you being potentially deplatformed. And then you would be very well off if you then had set up something like your own domain. That's of course the big risk of being deplatformed, for example. But apart from this, I think it makes sense to have a leaner channel setup, to have a lean recording setup, which also still allows me to do this basically completely on my own. I, in the last few weeks, scheduled hundreds of videos. Of course, I am also still studying, kind of, but I don't need at least somebody who schedule all of these videos, because the less work I need to do in total for a given amount of content I put out, the better it is, the more content I can put out, and the more I can focus on the content, which is actually the most important part. If the content is 20% better, then it doesn't really matter if I, for example, make a thumbnail that is 20% better. Of course, the thumbnail also makes sense, maybe. But maybe in the future also everything is kind of in a shorts feed, and then it doesn't make so much sense anymore. So what I'm thinking is this: the content is the centerpiece. And if I focus on making as much content as possible and as of high quality as possible, and of course the quality is constrained by my current version of me, which I therefore need to update and therefore have a reason to become better. If I become better at health, for example, and I achieve better levels of health, I can then in return again share how I managed to get to this level of health, and so on and so forth. It's a never-ending cycle because it is me in the center, at least for all of the brands at which I share content and that are not so much a product. And just like this here, this was just a decision of mine a few days ago. And now I can explain it and help potentially somebody else. Maybe potentially somebody not else, and potentially waste someone's time and they realize it only now. But what I'm also doing is I'm documenting this for myself. Does it make monetary sense to document this for myself? Probably not. But maybe in the long term it makes, because it also potentially could help others. And as long as my videos are not getting worse, as long as I am not getting worse, the videos cannot really get worse because they are based on me. And as long as I am not completely falling off the rail, I think I would be able to at least manage the current level of quality. And therefore, over time, as I put out more videos, so basically the only two things constraining what I'm able to produce is the quality and the quantity. And ideally the quantity would rise over time, and the quantity obviously also rises over time because I'm just able to output more videos. Whether the content rate also, so the quantity rate, so basically the quantity divided by a unit of time also rises over time, I don't know. But also I don't have a plan to actually increase it drastically. If I can, that's fine. If I don't, that's also fine. So basically the overall traffic, or engagement you could also say, is a function mostly based on the quality of a video and the fact that videos are there or not there, the quantity, then over time, I basically can only win so I already have kind of a proof of concept, which is that some people watch my videos. Whether this is a 50-hour rant, maybe 2 people might watch it, or it is a very short, controversial thing I put out on TikTok, which, because it's so short, it has many different interpretations, and therefore, the shorter something is, the more controversial can something be, just by being it short. There are many more interpretations. But as long as I am able to speak properly, as long as I'm able to make these videos, basically, as I then record these videos, I think my overall traffic can only go up until, of course, given the framework that I don't talk about things that many people don't like, or I get deplatformed or something like this, which obviously is a super big risk when it comes to content creation, which basically makes the whole content creation process kind of very horrifying, because at any point in time, you could just be deplatformed for something you said. And also, over time, if this is the censorship, then over time, I think it only increases. The question is why? Because I think we as a society figure out more and more what is actually good to talk about, what is less good to talk about, what is maybe inaccurate, for example, to talk about. So maybe in the future you could get deplatformed for saying something that is not true, according to the current state of science. Currently, you can also, but only if you have a very controversial stance on something. So much about how I simplified recording videos, making videos, distributing videos, and how I now am enjoying these videos, which maybe also infuses some emotions into the videos itself, because it's actually more fun to make them. Maybe it doesn't serve the purpose of being a higher educational product, but maybe more people watch it and will be educated in the process of it if I make it a little bit more entertaining by just infusing a few smiles here and then.